My name is Marion Holt. I'm 62 years old. People in Charleston know me as the woman who still trims her camellias by hand and keeps her porch light burning past midnight. I suppose that means I'm a little sentimental. Maybe too patient for my own good. The afternoon my sister arrived from Paris. The air smelled of salt and gardenias. Elena swept through the doorway like she'd carried the city's brightness home with her tailored coat. Red lipstick. That confident tilt of her chin I'd envied since we were girls. In her arms were glossy bags from shops whose names I could never pronounce. Paris sends its love, she said, setting them on my dining table. Out came bottles of perfume, silk scarves, and, finally, a handbag the color of fresh cream. The leather gleamed under the late sunlight. I reached out to touch it, half ashamed of how much I wanted to. Before I could say a word, Ronan and his wife appeared in the doorway. He kissed my cheek distractedly. Already glancing toward the gifts, Alina's perfume filled the room, something sweet and expensive. She smiled at my sister, all charm and poise. But her eyes stayed on the bag. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "So classic," Elena smiled back, polite but unreadable. "It's for Marion." For a moment, the room went still. Then Alina's smile froze. Just enough for me to notice. Ronan cleared his throat, muttered something about dinner, and the moment passed, leaving behind a faint crack in the warmth. Later, after they'd gone upstairs, I stood alone in the dining room. The scarf lay folded neatly beside the bag, the faint scent of Paris clinging to the air. I traced the stitching with my fingertip, hearing Elena's laughter echo faintly from the porch. Tomorrow night, she'd join us for dinner. And somehow, I already knew that small moment the way Elena looked at that bag had been the quiet beginning of something I wouldn't be able to stop. By the next evening, the house smelled of rosemary and baked salmon, Elena's favorite. She'd insisted on cooking together, moving around my kitchen with the same ease she had when we were girls, sneaking sugar from the pantry. It felt almost like old times, except for the faint tension that had settled in my stomach since yesterday. Ronan and Elena arrived late, dressed as if they'd stepped out of a magazine shoot. Ronan wore a pale blue shirt that matched his father's eyes, and Elena glowed in a cream dress, her phone already in her hand. She kissed my cheek lightly, the way people do when they don't really mean it. At dinner, conversation flowed easily at first. Travel stories, the taste of Parisian coffee, how the city lights shimmer after rain. Elena was radiant, her laughter warm enough to fill every quiet corner of the table. Then she reached down beside her chair and lifted the handbag. "I almost forgot," she said, handing it to me. "You didn't open it yesterday." The bag gleamed under the chandelier, soft leather catching the light. I smiled, a little embarrassed by the attention. Before I could thank her, Ronan hesitated, glancing at me, then reached toward the bag. "Mom, Elena might like this," he said cautiously. "Maybe she can try it for the evening." I frowned slightly, sensing the tension he was trying to diffuse. The words landed like a slap, gentle, but impossible to ignore. Elena smiled, hesitating. I just love classic pieces like this," she said nervously, gauging both our reactions. Her confidence wavered slightly, hinting that she knew she might be overstepping. Elena's fork paused mid-air. Her gaze flicked to Ronan, then to Elena, sharp and cold. "I brought it for Marion," she said evenly. Ronan shrugged, unbothered. "She already has plenty." "You always spoil her." For a moment, no one spoke. Even the air seemed to tighten. I felt the old ache in my chest, the one that comes from wanting to keep peace at any cost. So I smiled. "It's just a bag," I said softly. "If Elena likes it, she can borrow it." Elena didn't respond. She just watched me, eyes steady. as if she'd decided to remember every word that had just been spoken. The next morning, the house was still, the kind of silence that follows after something unspoken. I brewed coffee and opened the curtains, letting the Charleston light spill across the dining table where the gifts had been. Only the faint scent of Elena's perfume remained. The handbag, the scarf, and the small velvet box were neatly stacked in Elena's tote. On the guest chair, she had moved them while I was in the kitchen, leaving a faint trace of Parisian scent. I stood there for a long moment, waiting for reason to catch up with what I already knew. Maybe Elena had taken them upstairs, or maybe I'd moved them myself without remembering. I checked the sideboard, the hall closet, the spare bedroom. Nothing. When I reached the kitchen, Elena was already there, humming softly as she poured herself coffee into my favorite mug, the one with tiny blue wisteria painted along the rim. She wore a new silk scarf around her neck, pale rose with delicate stitching. My hands froze on the counter. "Morning," she said brightly. "You look tired." "Long night." I smiled, the kind of smile that costs something. Just thinking too much. She glanced at her phone, thumbs moving quickly, the way people do when they're pretending not to notice the tension in a room. A moment later, she set it down, screen glowing. Hours later, when I sat alone in the living room, curiosity won. I checked Elena's social media and saw a photo of her holding a cream handbag, one that matched the one Elena had given me yesterday. My heart sank as I realized it had been taken out of sight earlier, not vanished mysteriously. The caption read, "A touch of Paris." My throat tightened. Outside, the breeze carried the sound of church bells through the quiet street. I closed my laptop gently, as if shutting a door on something I could never fully get back. By afternoon, the Charleston heat pressed against the windows, heavy and unmoving. I sat at the edge of my bed, phone in hand, staring at the photo I couldn't unsee. The same bag, the same sunlight, the same caption that made my name feel erased. I dialed Ronan before I could change my mind. He answered on the second ring, his voice brisk, distracted. "Mom, everything okay?" I tried to sound calm. "Ronan, I saw Elena's post. The handbag your aunt gave me, it's in her picture." He sighed, the sound short and irritated. "Mom, don't make this a big deal. She loved it. You have plenty of things. My wife deserves nice ones too." The words were simple, but they cut deep clean, practiced, final. I gripped the phone tighter. "It wasn't yours to give." A pause, then a cold laugh. "You always overreact. It's just a bag. Mom, let her enjoy it." When the line went quiet, I realized my hand was trembling. I ended the call before my voice could break. Downstairs, I found Elena reading by the window, sunlight falling across her face. She looked up instantly, as if she'd already sensed something had changed. "What did he say?" I told her. Every word, every tone. As I spoke, her expression didn't shift, but the light in her eyes hardened. She closed her book slowly, setting it aside with deliberate care. "So that's how it is," she said softly, her accent sharpening just slightly. "Then let's see what else she deserves." Her voice wasn't angry, only measured, certain, and frighteningly calm. I didn't answer. I only stood there, feeling the distance between us shrink into something unspoken but unstoppable. Elena returned 3 days later, as if nothing had happened. She arrived in a linen dress and wide-brimmed hat, carrying a basket of fresh figs and French cheese from the market. "Thought we might have a little dinner," she said lightly, her tone so casual that even I almost believed her. By evening, the dining table was set again with candles flickering softly. Ronan and Elena arrived, polite but wary, the air thicker than before. Elena moved among us, controlled but human, her calm punctuated by occasional thoughtful pauses. She poured wine for everyone, her movements smooth, almost rehearsed. "You have such a beautiful home," Marion, she said, glancing at the high ceilings. Richard would be proud you've kept everything in such perfect order, though I imagine the upkeep must be expensive. Still, you've always been careful with the house, with the accounts. Ronan shifted in his chair. It's manageable, he said quickly. Elena nodded, as if the answer interested her deeply. Of course. And your name must be on everything now. Yes. That's what families do, plan for the future. Elena laughed a little too loudly. We've talked about that, she said. It's just paperwork, really. Once things settle. The air changed then. Almost imperceptibly. Elena's smile remained, but her eyes had gone cold. Ah. Paperwork. So often the cause of misunderstanding. She set down her glass and leaned back. You know, in Paris, people guard their inheritances fiercely. There's always someone clever enough to move a decimal or a signature. Ronan's fork slipped against his plate with a soft clink. Elena looked away, reaching for her glass though it was still half full. I said nothing. I only watched Elena steer the conversation like a pianist, guiding a familiar melody, her tone never rising, her words never striking directly. Yet each sentence landed exactly where she intended. By dessert. No one was laughing anymore. The plates were cleared, and the candles burned low. Elena kissed my cheek before leaving and whispered, Don't worry. I've seen families like this before. When the door closed behind her, Ronan avoided my eyes. Elena began gathering dishes with shaking hands. And in that quiet, I realized the balance in our home had shifted softly, decisively, and without a single raised voice. The morning after that dinner, the house felt oddly still, as if even the air was waiting for something to happen. Elena didn't sleep late. By the time I came downstairs, she was already at the dining table with her reading glasses on, my old laptop open in front of her. I couldn't resist organizing a few things, she said, her tone light. You're too trusting with your passwords. Marion, I smiled faintly. I've never had much to hide. Her eyes flicked up. That might be the problem. For hours, she combed through digital statements and bank records. Occasionally, she paused to double-check a transaction or call a bank for verification, slowing her pace and showing that even she could not see everything at once. I brewed us coffee, trying not to ask, trying not to imagine what she was seeing. Finally, she turned the laptop toward me. Here, she said. See these withdrawals? I flagged them as unusual, but some were hard to trace without cross-checking with receipts. It took a moment for the words to make sense. Several large transfers spread over months had been made from an account under my name, authorized by Ronan. The money was supposed to cover property taxes and maintenance. Instead, it had gone elsewhere to luxury boutiques, hotel stays, and something marked Elena Events LLC. My breath caught. He wouldn't. Elena didn't answer. She only slid a printed page across the table receipts. Each stamped, dated, and irrefutable. I know what this feels like, she said quietly. The first time you realize the person you raised stopped seeing you as family and started seeing you as access. The words hit harder than I expected. I folded the paper in half, then again, until my hands stopped shaking. What are you going to do? She asked. I met her eyes. The calm inside me colder than anger. Nothing. Not yet. Elena nodded slowly, understanding. Then I'll keep watching. We sat there as the morning light shifted across the table, the proof between us like a quiet storm waiting to break. Elena called it a reconciliation dinner. The word sounded harmless enough, though the way she said it carried the same sharp edge as her laughter that night in Paris when a gallery rival tried to insult her. Just family, she told me, smoothing the invitation card she'd had printed at a small shop downtown. No fireworks, just a little light. By evening, the house looked as if it were waiting for an audience. Candles flickered in silver holders. The crystal glasses caught the chandelier's glow, and the smell of roasted rosemary chicken drifted through every room. I moved slowly, placing napkins and cutlery, feeling the faint tremor in my hands fade with every quiet motion. Ronan and Alina arrived together, late as usual. He looked tense, adjusting his collar. She looked triumphant. Around her neck gleamed the pearl necklace Richard had given me on our 30th anniversary. My stomach tightened, but I said nothing. "Marian, you look lovely," Alina said, her voice dripping with civility. "I hope tonight we can put all this awkwardness behind us." Elena stepped forward from the kitchen doorway, her face perfectly composed. "Of course, my dear," she said smoothly. "That's exactly what tonight is for." When we sat, the table conversation hummed politely. Talk of Paris, the weather, Ronan's new clients. The air was thick with unspoken things. Yet Elena guided every word as if conducting an orchestra. Halfway through dinner, she reached for her glass and smiled faintly. "Before dessert," she said, "I'd like to offer a small gesture of peace." From her bag, she took out a gold envelope and set it in front of Ronan. The gesture was light, almost affectionate, but her eyes held him still. "For you," she said softly. Ronan blinked, uncertain. "What's this?" "Just something I thought you should see." Alina leaned closer, curiosity bright in her face. The room seemed to narrow as Ronan tore the envelope open. The faint rustle of paper filled the silence. I watched his expression shift confusion, then disbelief, then the slow collapse of composure. The candles hissed as a draft moved through the room. Outside, the last light of dusk spilled against the windows, golden and merciless. Elena didn't speak. She simply folded her hands, the faintest smile at the corner of her mouth, as if waiting for the truth to walk in and take its seat at the table. The paper trembled faintly in Ronan's hands. His eyes darted across the page's receipts, bank transfers, and neatly printed statements that spelled out a story too ugly to deny. Each line carried his signature. Each date matched the times he'd told me not to worry. "What is this?" he asked finally, voice low. Elena leaned back, her tone as calm as the ocean before a storm. "Just a little paperwork, for transparency's sake." She turned to me. "I thought it best everyone understood where the family funds were going." Alina laughed, the sound too high, too forced. "This is ridiculous. You're making it sound like—" But Elena was already reaching into her handbag. She drew out a small black recorder and set it beside the wine glasses. A soft click filled the silence. Ronan's voice emerged, unmistakable. "Mom doesn't need it. It'll be ours soon." The sound was clear, even cruel in its confidence. A few gasps broke from the guests who'd joined us, old friends of the family who'd come expecting a pleasant dinner. Alina's laughter died instantly, her face drained of color, her mouth parting as if the air had turned to glass. On the recording, Alina's voice faltered slightly, betraying hesitation. "She might not notice at first, but if it's transferred carefully, the renovations and sale will go smoothly." Her overconfidence was tinged with uncertainty. The silence that followed was unbearable. The chandelier's crystals trembled faintly, as if even they disapproved. Elena stopped the recording and met Ronan's eyes. "You wanted to build a future, didn't you? Here's the foundation you chose." He pushed the papers away as though they burned. "Mom!" I shook my head, my voice steady, though my hands felt numb. "This house was built on trust. Ronan, you broke it. Now you'll rebuild it on truth." He looked at me then, no longer the man who once corrected my cooking, or the boy who begged for one more bedtime story but someone stripped bare, unsure of what to do with the shame now clinging to him. Across the table, Alina rose suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. "This is absurd," she snapped. "You've twisted everything." Elena's gaze didn't waver. "We didn't twist anything. You just finally heard yourselves." The room felt smaller with every breath. Guests avoided each other's eyes. the weight of embarrassment heavy in the air. Ronan reached for Alina's hand, but she pulled away, her mask of charm shattering into something bitter and frightened. Alina hesitated at the door, glancing back. No one intervened immediately, and after a brief pause, she left. The front door clicked softly, carrying a quiet tension through the house. Ronan stood motionless, his shoulders sinking as the candles flickered low. For the first time in years, he looked around the dining room not as a conqueror, not as an heir, but as a man standing in the ruins of what he'd built. And I stayed still, not triumphant, not angry, only quiet, as truth finally settled into the spaces their lies had hollowed out. 3 days passed before Ronan came back. The sound of his car in the driveway was soft, uncertain, as if even the engine hesitated. When I opened the door, he stood there with his hands empty, shoulders bent in a way I'd never seen before. "Mom," he said quietly. "I lost everything, trying to prove I had more." His voice cracked, and for a moment he was no longer the confident man who once spoke over me at dinners, but the boy who used to run barefoot across the garden, begging for one more story before bed. I led him to the porch. The evening air was cool, touched with the scent of rain. He sat beside me, his eyes fixed on the floorboards. "I don't know how to fix what I've done," he whispered. I reached for his hand, not to excuse him, but to steady both of us. "You start by not running from it," I said, "and by learning that love isn't something to be taken, it's something to honor." He nodded, silent tears falling into his palms. I didn't tell him I forgave him. I just sat there, letting the quiet between us do it for me. Weeks passed, soft and slow, like the tide easing back to sea after a storm. The house was quiet again, its silence no longer heavy but calm. One afternoon, sunlight poured through the window of my bedroom, touching the glass bottle that sat on my dresser, the perfume Elena had brought from Paris. Still sealed in its wrapping, I had left it unopened on purpose. Some things, I realized, were meant to be kept as reminders, not used or displayed. Every time I passed it, I thought of her standing in the doorway that last morning before she left. "Some gifts test hearts," she'd said, buttoning her coat, her eyes soft but knowing. "But you passed, Marion. You always do." I smiled then, the kind of smile that comes from somewhere deeper than pride. "And some gifts reveal them," I replied. Now, each evening, I light the porch lamp before the sun disappears behind the live oaks. Its warm glow spills across the quiet street, steady and unhurried. I don't turn it on to wait for anyone anymore. I turn it on because the house, my house, deserves its own peace. And for the first time, I do too.